that must be done, there is an element of fun. You find the fun, and snap! The job's a game. And every task you undertake becomes a piece of cake, a lark, a spree. It's very clear to see that...
Let's start. Now, Julie, I know you've written about your life during the Blitz, haven't you? And I want to talk about your film work and your career and so on, and your theatre work and your writing. Just tell me, though, about your growing up, because I'm sure that some of our younger listeners won't even be aware that you grew up and survived the Blitz.
Yeah, well, the war ended when I was about 10 years old, I think, or about that. And yeah, we did survive the Blitz, and we moved a lot, and bombs were going off all around us one way and another. I remember distinctly the doodlebugs, which were those pilotless aircraft that would fly over and then just suddenly drop from the skies. And but I didn't know any better at that time, so my mother used to say to me, I wish you'd known what the world was like before war. And of course now I know what she meant. But it was an interesting time. And then I was a kind of theatre brat. I had this freak soprano voice that could sing 4 octaves and was very strong. And at about 7, I began taking singing lessons, and thank God for the good lady that taught me to sing well.
Wow,
and
so
that was my stock in trade.
Yeah, I was going to say, was this just a natural talent then that you almost discovered by accident?
Yes, I think probably my stepfather who did sing, but it was my stepfather who sang, he gave me singing lessons to sort of keep me quiet, so to speak, because my school had been shut down because of the war, and I was probably underfoot or whatever it was. But he discovered, to his surprise, and my mother was a fine pianist, and they discovered that I did have this very strong soprano coloratura voice, and it stood me in such good stead in my youth. And I really made a big professional debut when I was about 12 years old, 12 or 13.
You mentioned your stepfather. You've written in the past in rather less than flattering terms about him. Did you have an unhappy childhood?
I didn't know it at the time, Adrian. I mean, I don't think children do when they're coping with it all. I think I also wrote that I appreciated the things that he did do for me. He was the guy that found my voice, and he tried very hard to be a good stepdad, but he had an illness, which was alcoholism, and so I came to understand it as the years went by.
That's interesting, though, that as a child you weren't sort of conscious of being unhappy.
Mostly just missing my real dad, of course, which any child of divorce does.
Yes. And so by the age of 12 then, you've got this amazing talent which has been discovered, and pretty quickly then you're on the West End stage.
Yes. My debut was in a show at the London Hippodrome, which was a theatre in those days, and I don't think it is anymore. And it was a wonderful theatre, and I played in a show there for a year, and happily and luckily, fortunately, on the opening night, my single solo kind of stopped the show, and that was the kick-off to my career. I thought it would just be a flash in the pan, that it would fade when my time in the show was over, but lo and behold, it went on. I went on to do more work and more work and more work, and then I began touring all over England, and eventually, I think when I was 18, I think I was asked to go to Broadway, which was the second big major stepping stone in my life.
Incredible stuff. I don't know if you can remember this far back, Julie, that, whether in those tours of England, whether you ever played in Birmingham or Wolverhampton or Dudley.
I did.
Yeah?
Of course I did. Yeah, and I'm so looking forward to coming back to Birmingham.
You're at the NIA, aren't you? The National Indoor Arena.
On May 24th, I think.
You said you were a theatre brat. Was drama, were movies, anything like that then in your family, or were you just the lucky one?
My aunt my mother played the piano. Her sister, my aunt, was a dancing teacher, and so, oh my God, thank God for both of them, because my aunt gave me good posture, and I attended her classes whenever I could. She was a good teacher. She had her own school. And between my stepdad and my mom and my aunt, I guess, and all the touring that I did, I had a good grounding. My mum was very good with me. It was like, don't you dare get a swollen head. And, you realize how lucky you are. There's always somebody else that can do what you do, but better. So be grateful. And I've never ceased to be grateful for that advice and for what it is I do.
You've been a child star, then in the West End, then in, your early adulthood, you're on Broadway. And then Hollywood beckons, and your first movie...
I mean, how lucky can a girl get, really?
But your first movie, Mary Poppins, a massive hit.
It's supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, even though the sound of it is something quite atrocious. If you say it loud enough, you'll always sound precocious. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Well, of course, I'm going to be talking about all of that when I come to Birmingham, and I'm going to be going over the country. I'm doing other places as well, and it's something that I really love to do because so many people don't know about those early days.
Of course, the story of the making of Mary Poppins has been at the cinema lately. Is that do you think, a fair reflection of what really happened? And
yes, indeed it was. I happen to know Pamela Travers, who's the lady who wrote. She's the author of Mary Poppins, and Walt Disney wooed her for something like 20 years, I think, before she gave him the rights to her books. And she was pretty prickly, and of course I now, being an author myself, understand why she was so reluctant to part with her beloved baby, so to speak, which was Mary Poppins. And but she did, and Disney won her over, and I'm the lucky lady that was asked to do that film.
Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down in a most delightful way.
That thing of sort of having to give up your creation and handing it over to the world of the movies, which will do pretty much whatever it will and whatever it needs to get a hit movie, even if it isn't strictly faithful to the book, as was the case with Mary Poppins.
Well, that's true. I mean, it was pretty faithful, but probably embraced a couple of the other books as well. But, the addition of making it a musical, which she didn't want at first, and then she came to embrace it. The thing is, the basis of the book was there, and the wonder of Mary Poppins was there. And I think children all over the world, well, these days, children are still viewing it, and that's amazing.
Well, it is interesting. In our household, Julie, I've got two daughters who are 9 and 6, and along with the Doctor Who videos and the One Direction DVDs, I promise you, there is Mary Poppins and there is The Sound of Music, and they are both loved by my girls.
Oh, I'm so pleased, Adrian.
Why do you think? I mean, you've done so many successful things in your life. Why do you think that those two films in particular have managed to resonate down the years in such an incredible way?
I'm often asked that. I think in both cases the movies were valuable in that children watching them felt safe. Both films are really about family. The music's great. In the case of The Sound of Music, you have such beautiful scenery and 7 kids that they can identify with, and I get to sing all those beautiful, beautiful songs by Rodgers and Hammerstein, and, the mountains of Austria. Just, I think it connected to children in a kind of visceral way where they could identify and they weren't threatened too much, and it was a rattling good adventure as well.
Well, absolutely, and underlying it is a very dark story, a story with, I suppose, a happy ending.
Sound of Music for sure. Yeah. Yes, the threat of war and the Nazi invasion and so on.
In your movie career, you've obviously worked with some great directors. Tell me about Alfred Hitchcock, though, because you worked with him on Torn Curtain.
Yes,
and
I did.
His relationship with his leading ladies has always been a little bit fraught, shall we say.
Well, no, he was lovely to me. And I remember vividly one day he was setting up a shot on camera, and I happened to say, he said to his cameraman and his lighting man, we're going to be using a such and such lens at the moment. And I said, I really don't know much about film lenses and what they're called. He said, you don't know, and you're a woman in film. Come with me. And he took me away, and for about 20 minutes explained the difference between the close-up lenses and the long-shot lenses, and that I should never allow a certain lens to be used on me because it would elongate my nose in profile. And what a gift he gave me, I tell you.
Seriously, you were able to use that then later on in your film career to
Well,
say...
just know it in the back of my head, yeah. And he was very kind of very funny. He actually, I think for him, excuse me, I think the film was made in his head long before the actual filming began. And so he knew what he wanted, and he manipulated people so that for 1 second they were scared out of their wits and then were released by laughter or something else. And it was interesting to watch him.
Probably the first period in your career then when you suffered a kind of commercial disappointment would have been the 70s. I know you came back with movies like 10 and Victoria in the 80s. Duet for One was a very well respected film by the critics, not quite the level of hit though that you'd been used to having.
It was such a dark subject, and they happened, can you believe, Adrian, they happened to release it in America on Christmas Day. Now, it's not exactly the best day to release a very sad, dark film, and it's no wonder I think that it didn't do so well. I was grateful for the chance to do it.
But were you conscious at that time then of sort of being less commercially successful, less hot in box office terms than until that point you'd been pretty much all the way through your career?
No, I don't think so, Adrian, and that's no cop-out. I mean, I had been making other films that weren't as huge as the first. Well, actually, right after Mary Poppins, I made a wonderful black and white film called The Americanization of Emily, which is sort of a classic by people who know. But again, it wasn't that successful then. And so I've been sort of on, off. But I guess the first two big musicals in my life were so huge that they sort of eclipsed everything else I did. But I didn't feel that.
Yeah, you were able to enjoy the rest as it came
Yeah,
along.
and a lot of people say, oh, it was Blake Edwards, my husband, who turned things around.
And he was the director of 10, of course.
And 10 and Victoria, he was the director of that, and so many other wonderful movies, all the Pink Panther movies, Breakfast at Tiffany's, of course, which I wasn't in, but Audrey Hepburn was, The Great Race. I mean, he was a fine director, but I think being married, he spotted other things in me that he could use and bring out and employ, and so I was very lucky, and he wrote some wonderful films for me.
And even today, I mean, roles in movies like Shrek and Despicable Me. But
and The Princess Diaries, of course, yeah.
And I just think, that connection that you obviously have and that movie directors obviously seeing you, even, your voice in these animations, that something would connect. But, obviously with families and with adults, but something special that allows you to connect with children, I think.
Don't forget that possibly every 7 years a new generation comes along, and since the movies that I made at the beginning were family movies, there's always a new audience that's ready to see them.
And you were voted in the top 100 Britons of all time in a BBC poll.
Wow.
A couple of years back. Number 59, Julie.
Wow, that makes me feel terrific.
Not number one, but 59's not bad, eh?
No, I'll take it, believe me, Adrian.
For a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. The medicine go down, medicine go down. Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down in a most delightful way.